Well, g'day. This is Ross Thatcher here, masquerading as the Flat Earth Aussie Jesus once again. And I thought, I've got 24 minutes of recording time here, and it's one of the biggest contentious issues that I'm often hit with that people find amusing, is because I dared to put forth a hypothesis about how the moon came into existence. And so I thought it's probably about time I sat down and gave a really good discussion about it. And I've only got 23 minutes left. So here's a beer I prepared earlier. Quite some time ago, I might add. And here's a bottle opener I prepared quite some time earlier as well. And here comes the beer. Look at it. Oh, it's just frothy goodness. Can't get enough of wanting to join with the physical body, which is myself. So I'll give it a little chance to settle into a glass while I tell you the story about the moon. Now, okay, I get a lot of ridicule because the thing that people cling to the most is that tiny little aspect where I said giants mined the raw materials for it from the Grand Canyon. Now that is just speculative. It was always speculative. I've said that all along. I just speculate. Like, the raw materials had to come from somewhere, whether it be the Grand Canyon or otherwise, is not the issue of the story. The fact is that even mainstream science has long speculated that something of the Earth was knocked off or somehow taken away to create the moon. That is the most of the mainstream explanations for the moon's existence is where they came from. There are some very outrageous other explanations. Many of which involve aliens, spaceships dragging in the moon from another part of outer space, it being a hollow. What's that thing from Star Wars again? Death Star? Something akin to that. I've had an open mind to all these different contemplative ideas over the period of time. I'll just put that over there. That's a song I did earlier today. I think there are many things that most of us, following most of the mainstream concepts of the moon, can agree on. I mean, flat earthers can't agree on anything to do with the moon, and I find that highly annoying because it is 100% undeniably illuminated by the sun. So any flat earther that comes across and oh fuck, why is my phone buzzing away in my pocket down here, and tries to tell me that the moon is self-illuminating. Excuse me 1 second. I'll get back to that later. I'm making a video. a video. Serious video about the moon. They try and tell us that the moon is self-illuminating. Now that is 100% debunked. In fact, maybe while I've got this here, I'll even bring up a few images straight onto it. Once you hit the back button a few times. Here's number one. Now this is done by a good friend who I hardly know at all. So I'm not even going to mention her name because I can't even think of it. Let's see if the thing is going to... Okay, so good. The not the autofocus, the Normally that word would come straight to me, but I'm thinking too hard at the moment. The you know, level of light. That word. See how bright the moon looks? Oh, it must be producing its own light, but bring it a bit closer. Twist the angle a bit. Let the thing we're talking about, because we can't think of the word for it. Holy fucking shit. That word normally auto comes to me. It's exposure. Exposure. That's the word we're looking for. How much can we exposure? Which is what our eyes do too. That's how our eyes automatically adjust the amount of light. I mean, see the amount of light coming in this video. That's not happening here in reality. It's actually quite dull out there. It's almost like sunset and shit. But the auto exposure of the camera is making it look as though I've got spotlights out there or something, and even in my cupboard. I don't. It's just exposure. Exposure is a thing. So the next image, I think this is actually a really good one. Yeah, I'll even multiply it a little bit. Oh, look how bright it is. It must be. And look, see that? That is somebody's really cool, excellent image of the moon taken from here on Earth with an amazing magnification on her telescopic camera thing, and it's called the Nikon P900, and that is why you can see. I mean, have another look. Look at the shadows. Look at the angles of the shadows. Each and every one of those shadows is angled from the same direction. They're brightly lit in front, but the ones on the far side are showing angles of shadows, which is exactly what you'd expect if something was illuminated by a light source far away, which is what the sun does to the moon all the time. The illuminated side of the moon is always facing the sun. Once per month, where they're directly opposite one another, we see a full moon. The next day it rises 50 minutes later, and therefore the illuminated side, still shining towards the sun, is showing slightly less to us. The next day it's another 50 minutes. That's quite a significant amount of time when you think about it. Like these people that think that we see a full moon in the daytime. Wrong. You never do. You never, ever, ever see a full moon in daylight. You sit down there, good phone. It is absolutely impossible to see a full moon at daytime. Reason being, because daytime is caused by the sun. The moon is illuminated by the sun. If you think you're seeing a full moon in the daytime, you're not. You can just go and look it up. Look at any moon chart and you'll see, oh, actually the full moon is either the next day, because you've seen it early in the morning, or it's the previous day, because you've seen it later in the evening. Sunset, moonrise occur at the same time. They're still all on a parallel plane. There's no setting or rising involved. That's all just perspective. I'll have to save that for another video, because obviously most of this is going to go over most people's heads anyway, which is what the sun and moon are constantly doing. But I'm just here to tell you that the phases of the moon are caused simply by the fact that as it goes around us 24 hours and 50 minutes per cycle, and the sun goes around us 24 hours per cycle, they're not evenly matched the whole time. The sun is perfectly matched, and that is why there's 24 hours in a day. That is why we don't adjust our clocks. at all throughout the year. And for those globetards, for want of a better term, it's the kindest one I can think of them at the moment, because you are globetards if you don't understand this. If you put something in the centre, this is your sun, and you are going around it, but you are spinning on your axis every day by an exact amount of time, 24 hours. It's like, I wish I had a clock. A clock, which would be perfect, because every time I'm holding this finger up here, okay, that's going to be 12 o'clock midday. So it spins around 24 hours every day. By the time it gets around to here, here's your midday over here, and it's like at 6 p.m. from what it was when I was over here. And then when it's over here, there's your midday in the middle of the night. I think I'm going to sneeze. I was right. I sneezed. And then by the time it gets back over here, it's fucking 6 a.m. And here's your midday over here. Because that's what a 24-hour clock spinning 24 hours every day is only ever going to show. So now we've got that out of the way. I might do another one soon, you never know. The moon phases by simply doing 24 hours and 50 minutes around us is why less and less of the lit side shows to us until, okay, well, see, this isn't the sun. Obviously, it's just a fucking bottle opener. We'll get to that in a second. The Earth isn't going around the bottle opener, obviously, or the sun for that matter. What's really happening is you've got a North Pole, and the polar star is permanently fixed, and the sun goes around it, and the moon goes around it, and we're down here on the base beneath. That is why when the sun takes 24 hours to go around us, it's always above us overhead at midday. Would not be possible if we were going around it. And so now we've established that we're going around the sun. Let me rephrase that. Now that we've established that the sun is going around us, and the moon is also going around us, and the sun is illuminating the moon, and the moon takes 50 minutes longer each day to go around above us. The illuminated side of the moon, from us looking down from below up at it, is always going to be a slightly different amount of illuminated side showing to us. Once per month we see the fully illuminated side. That's the full moon, and that's the only time we see the moon all night long, when they, as I say, when it appears to rise as the sun appears to set, because of the distance and convergence and laws of perspective. I think I have to make a whole nother video to explain that as well. So eventually the sun catches up to the moon, and we can't see the moon at all. That's called the new moon phase, because the illuminated part of the moon is sufficiently bright enough to show through the glowing atmosphere. I mean, I'm serious. The sun has set, and you can still see the gases of the atmosphere illuminated, glowing due to the influence of the sun, because it's still, even though it's, 6,000 miles away? I don't know the distance. I can only guess, but we can sort of guess as to the fact the equator being about 25,000 miles around, and the sun going around the equator, and it comes back to the same place every single day at the same time, means it must be going approximately 1,040 miles per hour, which means that by the time it sets far enough away from us to stop illuminating the noble gases, it must be approximately 6,000 miles away from our perspective. The actual distance of the sun varies considerably, and that is why it appears to go northwards until June 22nd, southwards until December 22nd. I have described this multiple times, and I've lost a decent video that I made of it recently, but yeah, let's not dwell on the past. Let's look at where we're going now. The sun is heading southwards, obviously, outwards, as it spirals down, going the same exact circle around the equator constantly until it hits December 22nd, when it's going to be nearest to us here on Earth. And that's why we see on the sun analemma why the southern side of the infinite figure eight is much bigger when it's nearest to us, even though the two equinox points are exactly the same place. It all matches up. When something's nearer, it appears bigger. When something's further, it appears smaller. But the sun never changes angular size because we are not looking at the sun. We're looking at an apparition of the sun. And we're seeing it through the exact same amount of atmosphere every day, day after day, all throughout the year, through the same atmosphere which has those noble gases at the exact same height, which will always make the apparition appear the same size regardless of how far the real sun further above actually is. This is one of the most difficult things to wrap your mind around while you're still trying to grasp it. It takes a while to get a hold of all this. So the moon, which is what I came here to talk about, and I'm running out of time. Okay, so the moon being made by giants, melted from Earth material, potentially, possibly, mined from something that resembles a strip mine, which is what the Grand Canyon looks like. Pardon me. It's the one thing I cop the most amount of flack for. But after applying my considerable knowledge to the fact that the moon must be levitating above the Earth, and electromagnetic influences are the most likely reason why it is above the Earth. Because when you've got two magnets and you try and push like pole against like pole, what happens is they repel one another. So what happened is when these gigantic influences molted material out of the Earth, okay, let's just say they're giants, and let's just say that Satan was the one instructing them what to do. Just hear me out, just to hear it as a story. Let's just say that there was some great, insane mind directing these giants to mine the minerals out of the Earth and melt them down into a big molten ball. Now, if you know anything about magnets, you'll know that if you heat them up, they lose the magnetic influence. When they cool back down again, they gain their magnetic influence. So the minerals mined from whatever source, whether it be the Grand Canyon or some other place, I don't know. It's just the most logical explanation, since that's the greatest big strip mine we can see. They somehow, I don't know, what, giant volcano perhaps, giant big furnace, pits of hell. Who knows how they melted them all down, like volcanoes still do to this day, with some great mastermind able to work out how it was done. I don't know. Who do I look like? Fucking Jesus or something? I'm just a bloke with some theories, trying to push out some theories to see if they can be discredited. And to take just this one little aspect that it was giants and ridicule me for that. No, let's look at what really happened. What really happened is they made some molten ball of specific metals that as they cooled had this magnetic effect that they got repelled like opposite like poles get repelled from one another, and the more it cooled, then all of a sudden it just hits this specific point where as it's cool enough, this ball just gets repelled up into the sky, possibly shot off at an angle, and which is why it's still spinning around it. And as it cooled, obviously then the gases within the surface of all the molten material will just pop. Hey, g'day, Ben. Won't be long. They all just popped. Pop, pop, pop. And that is why we see what we see as craters. All perfectly spherical, many of them with something which would look like a bubble bursting in mud, dropping back down, but setting, because as it went higher, it cooled even more rapidly. And that is why it's set as the moon that we see as it appears today. Nothing hit by meteors or meteorites or whatever else you'd like to call them. And I'm just about out of time saving space anyway. So all I'm saying is that is why we have 2 tides per day. On the globe Earth, you've got one moon with one mass, and you've got one Earth. So as the moon is going around, or as the Earth is spinning, whichever way you want to see it, you can only have one tide per 24 hours and 50 minutes. In reality, we see 2 tides per day because it's going around above us, and that force which is holding it up in place is pushing the oceans down and around in front of it. And as they reach then the next continent, of course the oceans stop being pushed from that side, and they bounce back again, creating the lesser tide back on the other side. And by the time it comes around again 24 hours and 15 minutes later, then you've got the second or the next cycle of tides, which will be a fourth. You know, you got your high pushing there, you got your high bouncing back, and then your next one is your high pushing forward again, exactly as you'd expect by something repelling the water. You can't pull water. You can pull the container it's in, or you can repel water, but you cannot pull water by itself with a mass. So the moon on the globe, debunked. Moon explained on flat Earth. I'll be back later.